speakers to today's edition. This webinar series is looking at the safety and security dimension of space to see how can we make society more resilient. And Nereus is a network of European regions. We have currently 22 regions across Europe and a growing number of associate partners. We count Airbus amongst our associate partners, and also Space Tech. I saw they were involved in Space for Ukraine. We work on three main pillars: political dialogue, advocacy, interregional partnerships, networking, project activities. And in part of this is our webinar series where we inform our members on ongoing space policy developments, programs, and relevant projects and initiatives for the regional level. And we created three webinar series that are active for the moment. It's the one on safety, security, resilience, what we are having today. We have one for education and training, because we consider education and training really vital if we want to optimally use Europe's space infrastructure. We have one series on space solutions for sustainable tourism, because tourism is also a crucial economic sector in most of our member regions. And ongoing activities, we have webinars on latest programs and space policy initiatives to different topics. Today we have 66 registered participants, and I'm very to have your feedback and views. With this, I move to our first speaker. I warmly welcome Vasilis from the European EUSPA and the European Agency for the Space Program. Vasilis, you are going to present us and introduce us to Space for Ukraine. The war in Ukraine had second anniversary this February, and it had an impact on all our society. It had impacts in terms of the defense safety and security infrastructure in Europe, but it has also a huge impact on civilian sectors like environment, like humanitarian action, like agriculture, for many sectors that concern and are really close to the life of citizens. Vasilis, with Space for Ukraine, you created a platform bringing together data provider, bringing together service provider with NGOs. NGOs are very committed people. Their staff takes a very high risk to deliver humanitarian action and support in these war-stricken countries. And you will show us how your initiatives highlights, features how space technologies contribute to improve the situation. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Vasilis Kalogiru. I work in EUSPA, in the EU Agency for the Space Program in Market and Downstream Innovation. I'll try to share my slides. Thank you very much for this invitation, Roya. I would like to thank you and Margarita for organizing this and also the series of webinars, which I find very, very interesting, informative, bringing together various aspects that space can help, and safety and security dimension is very, very important nowadays. And if you want me to go a little bit beyond, because I will talk about EU Space for Ukraine, but the context is also we found ourselves in many other conflicts right now in the world, in our vicinity here in Europe. And this creates humanitarian situations that require support. Space puts a little bit, one small piece inside this difficult humanitarian action. I like also that the rest of the participants and presenters today use the word humanitarian action, because it's much more about is much more about aid, is not only about aid, is about action in general terms. And when we talk about the role of space for humanitarian action, usually we connect it only with the observation part, with Earth observation. I have to be honest, also me, I'm doing the same kind of mistake as an Earth observation expert, but there is much more to it. So I hope you can see the full slide now. So the storyline for today, I would like to give you a little bit the context on why we do what we do. We're not a humanitarian organization, we're not a humanitarian aid agency, but we see the connection between what space is able to deliver to humanitarian actors, to what industry providers are doing and are able to deliver. And these linkages are the ones that we're trying to reinforce. I will speak coming from EUSPA, and maybe some of you will not know our agency. I have just a couple of slides. I don't like to bother you too much, but I think it's important that you have a clear understanding of our mission, and then about the initiative and where we are with it. But as I said, I would like to start with why we do that. I already mentioned it, building the linkages between what the EU space innovation community and ecosystem is developing or can develop, and what the humanitarian actors in Ukraine need in practical terms. And sometimes these realities are totally different. You might not be able to see the linkages. I've been myself in events and meetings where I was speaking with NGOs, and when I said I'm coming from the EU Agency for the Space Program, the question that came back was, so what are you doing here? Well, we'll see here what we're doing here and what is the connection. So as I said, a couple of slides. First on the EU Space Program, because it gives with its components and its breadth, enables different capabilities. On one side, the EGNOS and Galileo, working on the positioning, navigation, and timing part, which is quite important because it's used in many airports and many helipads in various countries. Many of the actors, when they deliver humanitarian mission, for example, using EGNOS or Galileo to navigate, and we talk about how to navigate the ground. This is one of the crucial needs, by the way, of NGOs. The Copernicus components, which brings the Earth observation part on it, knowing, having awareness of the field, what is happening on the field. Sometimes we have to deal with, for example, camps. You have to deal with situations that are dangerous, so important to have awareness, map different features on the ground. And this is what, on one side, Copernicus delivers data that enables you to do that, but also services, specifically the Copernicus Emergency Management Service, which was not initially answering humanitarian needs, but there are also many activations with regard to humanitarian events. And then the SATCOM component, which is all equally important for actors working on humanitarian missions where maybe communication is not accessible. And us as EUSPA, what is our mission? Exploitation, security, utilization. We make sure that the services are operated. We are, on behalf of the Commission, the European Commission, operating specifically Galileo and EGNOS services, making sure that are delivered according to the service level agreed. We are operating also, and we're not operating, but we're developing currently the GovSatcom Hub, which will enable pooling and sharing capabilities of SATCOM towards EU member states. We make sure that whatever we build is secure. So we deal with the security, we accredit the systems, and we monitor continuously security of the system. But also we work on utilization, and this is where we are, why I'm here today, to talk about how we develop the market and will help the various users with downstream applications. So EU Space for Ukraine build these linkages. I talked about it before, but I didn't talk about what are the various components. And there are three basic things inside this initiative. We look on networking, building, enabling people to come together, to having an interface for people to discuss, the platform to discuss, demonstrations, so showing to users what is possible, and of course enabling having some opportunities, because I need to be also pragmatic here, that without opportunities, you have to trigger also the interest of the industrial actors. And this means that you should have some opportunities for them also to get involved in this ecosystem. The open network that we have built so far has more than 50 participants, and we have them in these 3 different categories: the ones that bring some space solutions, the NGOs, and the data providers, which are a specific and kind of, I would say, animals. So we have them as a specific category, because data providers are bringing a lot of, I would say, meat on the table, you know, the real component where we can work with data in the downstream. And if you want to be, if among us today we have any of you that are in any of these 3 categories and you would like to be more actively involved or part of this network, this is the email address. I'll leave it here. You can email us, EU Space for Ukraine at euspa.europa.eu. A few words about the event, how it started, the initiative, how it started, and where we are now. So you will see the timeline. It's not something we started now. It's something that goes back some months after the invasion in Ukraine. We launched this initiative in April 2022. So the first launching activity was bringing some NGOs and innovators together, but mostly it was for us communicating that we are open to any interested companies and NGOs. So that was a very, very first event. What you see here on the right, it was a teleconference. It was still kind of a COVID period, so that was a webinar event where we presented the initiative in the open. A follow-up was done a couple of months later on, where we break in the room some of the NGOs that were engaged, and we did initially learning sessions, what we call learning sessions from the field, understanding the reality of the field. So we start hearing from NGOs what are the basic problems and needs, where they are there doing their job. And actually, more than 90% of what people do on the field might not be connected, or very hardly to be connected, with space. We need to recognize that it's a different reality. But for the rest, 10 or 10, 15, 20 is difficult to quantify percent of what they do. This is where space fits, and this is where we could develop solutions together. And this is why we had also one-to-one meetings, connecting some of the companies and innovators you see on the right with the NGOs on the left. What you see in this also little cloud were some innovators basically that have also a little bit particular role in the ecosystem, like Tech Ukraine, for example, which is being presented as an NGO, but also has a strong capability to develop solutions, or help code, which help developers bring their solutions to the market. So these are the actors we try to bring together. Apart from bringing together, as I said, opportunities is also that creates this ecosystem. So the hackathon was for us a good opportunity. Also, some months after, in the summer of 2022, to bring together various projects, various ideas, more than 10. I think I have 13 project ideas. We have 7 participating teams. And what you see here, and it makes the concept a bit more concrete of what kind of solutions were awarded in the hackathon. The winner, from Spain, proposed a solution where you could use Galileo and Copernicus data to solve the navigation challenge. As I said before, when you are in an environment that is continuously changing, certain roads, I would say, symbol that you have mapped in the past, and you have maybe in your Google Maps application, for example, are not anymore accessible. So you cannot assume that you will use any kind of navigation device as easy as you would do in a city or in an area that doesn't have a conflict. So this reality, and this is where the solution of Laia comes into, has been solved by having observation of Copernicus on the one side and linking with the navigation component. So updating your navigation according to certain changes that comes that are detected on the field. Very practical one, very practical solution. Then we have integrating from Germany, well, which is an IT developer, and it has a tool, a proposal for a tool to help municipalities and aid organizations, simply building interfaces for them to interact, like interaction among refugees, for example, and municipalities, creating platforms that will help this exchange of information. And then on the third place, we have Web2Learn at BLB. Participants, we focus on the cultural heritage problem in the context of conflict, which is an interesting one. Also in the in the absence of big databases which can inform on what the impact on various cultural heritage sites in Ukraine is. So using space data for this identification and mapping of the damages on cultural heritage. Again, very, very practical and useful applications. What we did apart from that is hearing from the users. In 2022, we had our user consultation platform, so bringing the community together, as I say. We had a session on emergency management, but also sessions on the humanitarian aid part. What I'm sharing in the slide are just summary, high-level summary, I would say, of needs that come from various participants. We had WFP, the World Food Program, also with us, and other participants like Red Cross from Spain, which are active in Ukraine. We discussed some of the needs, and the output is what you see on the right, a report that we issued, and we are going to repeat that. We're going to have also another user consultation this year in the framework of the EU Space Week. More information will come when we have just started organizing it. So if you see in the middle, the list, we talk about awareness, accessibility of Earth observation data, timely access, short cutoff times. So these kind of needs that are, I would say, quite well known to us, but also needs we have to do not with the technical part, but simplifying access. Complexity of your language was mentioned by humanitarian actors. The majority of these NGOs do not have, we need to understand, the capabilities to build their own, geospatial, to utilize or to operate heavy geospatial solutions, for example. They would like simple interfaces. Some of these NGOs that are maybe more or better finance or have better resources or have better personnel, they could do the geospatial job, as we say, but many of them would like solutions that primarily are open. They rely a lot on open source and open data. They use, for example, QGIS for the simple mapping processes. But their complexity is something that was mentioned a lot during the discussion. And then there were also discussions about the GNSS component, and when they are on the field, they would like, of course, to have something handy as a device that is not consuming so much, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the kind of needs that came up into to the discussion we had. Which leads me to the demonstrators, because discussions are good, but if you cannot, tangibly demonstrate to the actors the solution, you're not going to have the impact. So in the EU Space for Ukraine demonstrators, we try to do exactly that. You see the three thematics. I'm going to show you very briefly examples of these three. So assessing conflict impacts in agricultural fields. We focused on developing up-to-date maps for fieldwork navigation, something we connects also to the winning applications you saw in the hackathon, and also how the Galileo-powered drones can support search and rescue operations, because we talk a lot about Earth observation, but there is also there the component of how drones with a different perspective and different, I will say, agility can support search and rescue operations. Starting from the first, I don't know how much time I have more, but I'm not going to do.
We have plenty time.
Okay, thank you.
Take the time you
Thank
need.
you. So first use case on assessing conflict impacts in agricultural fields. The output is a white paper where we show exactly how we can do that with Copernicus. Again, Earth observation and Copernicus provides the observation, let's say, component. I would ask, please, if you can mute your microphones.
Yes.
I hear some background noise.
Please mute yourself.
Yeah, I think it's Raul that is.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, some background noise. So we want to show how we can, with Copernicus, facilitate the implementation of various strategies. Because first thing, before you take action to alleviate the impacts of the war, you need to know what kind of impacts we're talking about. So quantifying a little bit better the impact, something that more or less we knew that there will be an impact in agriculture, but we put numbers in it, and this is quite important. And I say this is the primarily the thing we wanted to do. Also reinforcing, of course, I'm clear on that our focus and objective is also to enforce adoption of Copernicus. Just some examples of observations, of course, multi-spectral and multi-temporal as well. Even if Ukraine is primarily quite in certain periods cloud covered, we have also Sentinel-1, which brings some SAR data apart from the visual and NDVI series that you see here as an example. And what is the output? Because at the end of the day, what the user would like is output and information and intelligence and statistics out of it. And this is what you see on the right, how we can quantify the impact in various crops and also in various areas. So you see, for example, this decrease in 2022 in the extent of cropland in Ukraine for certain crops. So we shouldn't take the assumption that this happens in every single crop. You see also transitions of crops. For example, certain crops did even better in 2022. So you need to start understanding a little bit more the impact at a better level, I would say, at a better, at a more detailed assessment. Certainly wheat and barley, sunflower and corn were impacted the most. But as you see, also we attempted the estimation for 2023. Results were not that bad for sunflower, for example, in 2023. And the climate and the weather certainly helped. And this is something we see in the statistics. Apart from the white paper, you have a story map that you can access. So it presents a bit more in a visual perspective the statistics that we took from the analysis on Copernicus data, but also it brings in some examples of EU Space for Ukraine network solutions. So our industrial network, our community, let's say, so it was a good opportunity also to show capabilities of companies that are part of our network. What you see here is an example from ISI mapping the collapse of the dam, the impact that it had in the area, the flood that followed, but also capabilities from other companies doing NDVI analysis and multi-temporal analysis of the vegetation in Ukraine. And also crop field mapping at scale, I would say, by a company called CareMap, or a friend's startup. So quite good capabilities to bring in the attention to various actors. The second use case was the up-to-date maps for fieldwork navigation, where in collaboration with Cloudflare, another company that is part of our network, we developed a solution, a tool. Example, you see here a simple interface, which was tailored on the needs of Red Cross Ukraine. What you see on the left is a picture from our demonstration day. in September last year in Lublin in Poland, where Red Cross Ukraine colleagues joined us in a session, in a full day session, when we demonstrated the application. And you actually see that brings together data from Copernicus in an easy interface for them to use, but also another need that they have, which for us sounds a bit exotic, to print PDF maps and take them on the field, because certain areas that they access, they can actually not use electronic devices. So that was a simple need that came up during discussing with them. And the interface is also translated to them to make it easily accessible. What can they see to the resolution that this is possible? Of course, some impact in specific roads or bridges. This is an example of an unserviceable bridge, which was destructed, bombed, basically. So it provides them a bit of information before they get deployed on the field or reaching an area from point A to point B, entering into this interface, having a look at the most recent Sentinel-2 or Sentinel-1 data that are available through the interface. And the last use case that we test with them, again, all the photographs are from a demonstrator day, showing also the power of Galileo here, and how drones can support search and rescue operation. We performed training, we demonstrated these solutions. Not only drones, there were also a couple of solutions we tested, specific devices that are able to locate mobile phones, particularly in cases where you have, buildings collapsed and you're looking for people that might be trapped, for example, and their devices are not strong enough to reach the typical GSM antennas in the area, but having handheld devices or having these antennas mounted on a drone can help detect which devices are there. So this is from a demonstration, but also the cameras, the thermal cameras, are quite equally important for them when they are on the field or where they are before entering, I would say, certain buildings. They showed us examples of buildings being half collapsed. So operating there, being asked to enter this building might be dangerous. So deploying before entering the building and drone to understand a bit better the situation is very, very helpful for them. And I should mention also Global Smart Rescue and SME who supported us in this demonstration, along with colleagues from Red Cross Ukraine who joined us on that day. And I will close with the impact, because we do what we do because we want to have an impact. We want to have these solutions very well understood. What space program brings in the table well understood. So our primary user for that was Red Cross Ukraine. So for sure, it's at least the persons that were actively involved on that much more informed. They were trained. We managed to raise awareness inside, and having EU Space for Ukraine as an adoption instrument, as I say, is very important. But we need to follow up, and following up means continue the connection with the user, even when the project finishes. And this is where we are now at this phase. The photographs that you see here are obtained actually from one of these drones that Red Cross Ukraine uses after the project finishes, and it's important to get their feedback and understand how they're utilizing what they learned from the use cases. The interface that I showed before, we know that they are about to perform a training on this. Yes, Roya, I'm about to.
Can you come slowly to an end?
Yeah. This is the end. This is the last slide. I was just about to say that we are following up with the user, and what is it? What we are in the process of performing, and the Red Cross Ukraine will perform trainings internally in training the personnel on how to use the interface with the Copernicus data in it, but also they are showing us how they are deploying drones and how they learn through the trainings and the demonstration day that we have their usability. So things are changing little by little, and this is where we need to follow up with the user and understand better the impact we have. And that brings me to the end. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Vasilis, for this important initiative that really showed us with a very clear and practical examples the dimension of space to make societies more resilient. And I like to open the floor for first reactions or questions. Please let them have in the chat. I received one comment from Marie-Noëlle Tuzo. Just to mention about the jamming and spoofing of GNSS signals affecting safety and security seen in the previous slide of the presentation. And then she gave a quotation, AN 16803/3 was published in 2020, Assessment of Security Performance of GNSS-based positioning terminals addressing jamming and spoofing. Then we received another question.
Maybe before, just because it's
Yes?
not a question, it's just a comment on this. It is particularly important problem on deploying, I would say, also personnel on the ground. And this is something that Red Cross Ukraine also mentioned, that certain areas, of course, they cannot easily navigate. And there are not areas also only in Ukraine, you have areas also in EU, in the border of EU, currently facing jamming and spoofing issues. And that's my comment here.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a next question. Does Copernicus have pre-classified images like dynamic world in the case of Sentinel?
Okay, that's I find it hard to understand the question from DA. Pre-classified images, meaning if the intention is land cover maps, which are classified, yes, these are delivered from the land management service, but I don't understand dynamic world in the case of Sentinel.
Maybe he put a second one right below or right next. Can we have access to Copernicus data on Google Earth Engine?
Yes, to my knowledge, they can have access to Copernicus data through Google Earth Engine. But of course, being an officer from EU, I would suggest EU interfaces like the Copernicus data ecosystem, DIAS platforms, and other kind of platforms that EU companies are offering in the market. Yeah. But I understand that many of the developers are using Google Earth Engine for their tools or research, depending on what you do.
I saw that Lorenz likes to react. Please, Lorenz, the floor is yours.
Yes, but just one thing to the question of Dynamic Earth. Dynamic Earth is a product from Google that classifies each image that comes in with the classification of land cover kind of thing on the fly. It's a kind of product that, as far as I understand, is not provided directly from Copernicus, but by Google. But I mean, that's fine. You have to experiment with that, whether that works for you or not.
It's called Dynamic Earth or Dynamic World?
Dynamic World. Not so sure exactly.
Okay.
I think it's Dynamic World. You're right. Yes. I think that was why. And I have the question is, okay, the matchmaking between companies and USPA and users, how does that work? Is there actually funding available for companies to provide a demonstrator? Because our experience working with humanitarian actors is, well, they don't have much money for testing and seeing things where they are not sure what comes out of it.
Well, in the first round of matchmaking, right now, this activity, let's say, comes full circle in the sense that the matchmaking took place in 2022. At that moment, yes, there was the budget available, which was the one utilized later for the demonstrator. For us, that was, I would say, scoping activities to understand if out of the matchmaking, we have good, let's say, couples to invest further on a demonstrator. So at that moment, yes, we had budget, and this is how we actually developed the demonstrators, the 3 use cases that you saw, which included also actually analysis of the use cases. And then we selected these 3 and we proceed accordingly. Right now, no, there is no funding available. We are in more, valorizing what we did, and this, webinar offers an opportunity for us to show what we did. But it's an interesting initiative because it has an impact. You said it, that NGOs do not have, the resources available. I mentioned it also before in terms of experienced personnel. Sometimes there is also this problem. So there is a good opportunity, but you need to be more stable on your investment there. And right now we don't have funding available, but we are trying to. I cannot promise anything, but for sure, it's an initiative that raised attention, and it should be continued.
Okay, thank you. I have one comment to your presentation, to the use case with the drones. Our Polish Vice President, Marshal Ortel, who represents the Polish region Podkarpacki on the platform, he wrote for the Committee of the Region an opinion on the drone 2.0 strategy. Maybe if I could ask the colleagues from Podkarpacki to put the link in the chat, could be interesting for the participants also to see what you presented in the Committee of the Region. Then I like to move on and come to the next speaker. I'm very glad to welcome Ahmad Alubaidi. And Ahmad, you were originally from the University of Salzburg, and your company, Spatial Service GmbH, is a spin-out founded out of the university activities. We are very curious to hear your experience, remote sensing for humanitarian action. And when introducing you, I like also to say one word again about Nereus, because you are a very important protagonist on our platform. In most regions, SME and young entrepreneurs are the protagonist of the network activities. As I said, Nereus stands for Network of European Regions Using Space Technologies. We are working on this transformation of the space data into useful informations for companies, for research organizations, also for NGOs, for any user that may take a benefit out of the data. And we really want to understand what are successful approaches to grasp this knowledge and what are problems on the way. And the public user is also, let's say, a central target group, and bringing service provider like you better in contact with public users, with public administrations, using the data, but also being in charge of regional and economic policies in the territory, we try to bring together. With here, Ahmad, I give you the floor and look forward to hear more about your experience.
Thanks. I also accompanied by my colleague Jonas, also is here. We are from Special Services Salzburg, and as you said, we are a spin-off the university. Also, we are working very closely with the University of Salzburg. We will start to share our presentation and start right away. So A little bit about the company. We were founded in 2015. Currently around 20 employees. In the EO team, we are 4 to 8, depending on what we are working on or the task that we are working on. Among our clients, there are different NGOs. The main client, let's say, or the biggest client is MSF, which is Doctors Without Borders. In smaller tasks or smaller projects with the JRC and with SOS for children from the UNICEF and the World Bank, and also some other educational institutes, one of them like Johns Hopkins University in the US. We mainly do Earth observation services. We are called the operational team for the operational support team for the MSF activities for humanitarian aid. We split our work internally into 2 parts, let's say. One related or oriented to the population services or population analysis aid. So from population estimation, population change detection, medical campaigns, and also the environmental services, the environmental analysis from flood detection, water body extraction, and flood detection, which Jonas is in charge of. A little bit about an overview about MSF activities. Everybody knows Doctors Without Borders, so we are part of these activities. We are not doing all these activities. We are part of these activities, but we work in different countries around the world. We were also part of the Ukraine support and the Ukraine aid, the humanitarian aid, also through another channel, let's say, through Ukraine Observer, which was a collaboration from Satellogic, a satellite provider, image provider, with their partner in US also. And we were working on this on to support MSF. So they had the connection and we were just supporting them in this. About our projects or the long-term projects that we're providing for different institutes, different clients. There's something called dwelling extraction, which is only extracting buildings and dwellings and camp settlements in refugee camps mainly, but also in some cities and in some IDPs. This kind of projects are separated into the need or how it's targeted. So if we do an extraction for just tents or camp structures, then it's a dwelling extraction only without any other support or any other later projects. But if this project is getting bigger and goes to another point of time also, then we will have a dwelling change and a dwelling density, which in this case also done remotely using very high resolution images. We do building detection or dwelling extraction into something called semi-automatic procedure, mainly using deep learning in support of Esri projects or in support from Esri projects. Also, we do some projects using e-cognition and some tailor-made models internal here in the company. Part or as a use case or case studies that we were working on, or an operational task that we were working on. This was last year from the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. This was a damage assessment support, not similar to what we are doing usually. and also later on settlement extraction and the new camps that emerged after the earthquake. And also we worked in this with MSF separately and with JRC under a framework that we are working on as a subcontractor for JRC. Also, some other example from damage assessment. This was the explosion happened in Beirut a few years back in 2020, and we were also one of the first companies to respond to this, and we had our data published by MSF also because the request is initiated by Doctors Without Borders, and we do the analysis. And in that one, we were also working with the University of Salzburg. And from here, I will hand it over to Jonas to continue for the environmental services.
Okay, so yeah, now I will start with the flooding because that's by far the biggest product we have on the environmental side. And for this one, we actually mainly use Copernicus data, Sentinel-1, the radar data, SAR data, which is helpful if the areas are cloudy, which often is the case if there's active flooding going on. And also Sentinel-2, the optical data to support it, or use as validation data, since it's easier to validate data with the optical data compared to the SAR data. And this was a case in autumn 2 years ago in Pakistan. And the map on, or the area on the right, it's a huge area. It's around 60,000 square kilometers, the AOI. And this was actually mainly done to answer also one of the previous questions in Google Earth Engine. So the Sentinel data, the raw data is available in Google Earth Engine. We also have some in-house capabilities nowadays, which can actually rival some of the Google Earth Engine approaches, mainly with optical data, not with SAR data so far, though. This is also a quick example, also going to the agriculture. It's a quick and rough estimate. It's just land use change, in this case in Nigeria. And this is index-based, not too fancy. It needed to be done quickly. The request came in, the field needed it right away. So we just did index-based change. And in the end, you can estimate some agricultural production from this, but it's not too close to agricultural production. For this one, the next one might be more interesting, where we had a big order from JRC in Afghanistan and Tajikistan. And big part of this was infrastructure extraction, buildings and roads, which we did with EHR data. And then the main part actually was an agriculture part, where we did parcel delineation of the fields in the valleys of the mountains there in the border region. And for the agricultural productivity, we used also NDVI, which is a rough estimate, but to actually get the crop kinds, the crop fields which are in this area, we used the data cube and used spectral indices, and this whole thing was also built up on Sentinel-2 data. So for this part, we only used, let's say, European data. For the infrastructure, also some other data. And this is a more concrete and more reliable approach compared to the index-based before, because we actually had a data cube which where we had Sentinel data for the whole year or the vegetation period, and from this you can derive spectral indices and then get a crop classification, and from this crop classification actually get the agricultural productivity. And this was the second year's activation was going on, so we compared it also with the last year. You can have this productivity estimations as shown in the presentation before as well for Ukraine, and in this case for another country, but basically this approach you can do in every area of the world. And for the software used, we have a mix between open source software and commercial software, whatever the user needs in this case. Maybe just here as well, we are not the research entity here, that's Lauren's part in the next presentation, I guess, and we just try to implement research from the university. We get orders from NGOs from the field, and then we try to implement it as quickly as possible. Some are standardized, where we did it for the last, let's say, 10 years for example, the dwelling extraction. Some are more new to us, for example, flood estimation and this crop detection, where we just try to deliver good product on the go, basically. Yeah, I think time is running, so we will just come to a quick end. Thank you and for listening, and we're definitely here if you have any questions, if something was too quickly, because we try to stick to the time, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Ahmad, we are very glad you brought also your colleague, that you shared and brought different aspects into the discussion. And your views are especially valuable to us because you are really developing the products. You are really have the insight of an economic player, of an actor, and your sector is growing rapidly, and we hope even more. And this is also one objective on our platform, really better understanding also your needs and what do companies like your need, and to channel that to the political level. I open warmly reactions to the presentation we heard, and I have also one. How did you find your clients? How do you use, are the NGOs your clients, or is it more the governmental level?
To find clients is hard, of course. We don't find clients all the time. But through our maybe previous collaboration with the NGOs, we had different clients through our work here in the office, and also through the University of Salzburg. Maybe governmental in other aspects, in other projects that we have in the company. We have several groups here in the company which works with the government sector, also in Austria and also in Germany. But for our humanitarian team, we mainly, let's say, the main or the biggest clients is NGOs.
Thank you. I see that Lorenz raises his hand. You like to react? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to add to that that when you look at the products by spatial services, you might think, well, it's mapping of buildings and it's mapping of floods, that it cannot be so complicated. And to a certain extent, that is true. I mean, there is still research, and I will go a bit into that, but to a certain degree, that is true. But that means the challenge actually is not so much doing the mapping for a business. The challenge is more to make the user, or to have the user understand how to make use of those products. So from our experience, I mean, we started this cooperation with MSF 10 years ago or so, or even more. And at that time, okay, we could produce some products, but then the user has to see what can they do with that. So it's to make a product that is being used is not so much a technical challenge, but it is a challenge of mutual understanding what the needs are from spatial services side and our side. The needs are, as far as we understand, that it has to be very practical, it has to deliver very fast, and there has to be a common trust in the services, and the team has to be very responsive. So these are, of course, not really technical needs. Of course, it's a technical question how fast things can be done, but the stage of just presenting what's technically possible is not the real challenge to make something work. So, and that is the strength of spatial services, that we can demonstrate that, and we together, we kind of understand how the NGO people function, how they work, how they think. And it's great to have this company, which is a specialized service provider, let's say, for humanitarian actors in particular, of course, we wouldn't do work for others. We wouldn't refuse work for others either.
I see. I see. Vasilis, I see you raised your hand. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask. That was an interesting presentation. The question is, to which level they tailor to Médecins Sans Frontières in this case, the products. Do they have tangible inputs like we would like you to map this whatever object, and we would like it to show with this, I don't know, icon on your maps? Are the users and the customers into this detailed in the as regards the product itself? Are they knowledgeable, meaning to the way that they can tailor something that you provide to them? I don't know if I make my question easily. Do you have iterations about, or is there a standard way that you present? For example, where there are certain standards that define what kind of features you can map, the way you will extract them, the way you will even present them in terms of icons. Are you using this kind of standards? Are the users picky on this kind of details, let's say?
Yes.
Yes.
about the picky part. No, actually, it's a close collaboration, and we are working with them as a part of, sometimes even as part of MSF, like we are in their platform. So we work on their templates or their standards,
Okay.
and it's tailored for them to be shared with their deployed people or advisors or whoever is working or whoever in need for these products. In exchange, of course, depending on the client, but for MSF, if you are asking especially for MSF, it's tailored to their needs, and they have their mapping team. Also, they have their GIS unit, and they have also an Earth observation unit now in Vienna that we are working very closely with them.
And just to follow up, a lot of the things you do are based on images that you have to, I mean, data is the basic of your product, right? You do it on top of images. Some of them are Copernicus Sentinel data, which you have an access point, various access points, but you work also on very high resolution data. You have certain agreements with these providers.
In our case, it's coming from MSF. Let's say for MSF work, they will provide the data, or they will provide the very high resolution images, depending on their agreements with the providers.
Okay.
In other situation, when we have to provide the images, we do have some. It's depend on the task itself. So we have some not really long-term agreements, but we have short-term agreements that we can use some images to work on.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Thank you. Any more reaction? We move on to the next speaker, but to the whole audience, we are very interested in your comments. Don't hesitate to ask questions. And we are especially also interested in the views of the NGO participants that are with us today. And we would be interested also to know, have you been in touch yet with space? What's your view on space? Are you open to bring space solutions to your work? I'd like to move on to the next speaker, Lorenz Wendt, Paris Laudron University, Salzburg. Lorenz, you are presenting us in the university initiative, initiative of your university, also together with the Doctors Without Frontiers. Please, the floor is yours. Earth observation for humanitarian action. We are curious to learn more.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me share my screen quickly, and then we go. Yes, Earth observation for humanitarian action, indeed, or research for Earth observation and GIS for humanitarian action, however you want to say it. So first of all, about the construction, it's called a Christian Doppler laboratory. So it is kind of a research laboratory that was funded in part by MSF and in part by public money from the Christian Doppler Society. And it is located at the Paris Lodron University of Salzburg. Paris Lodron is a person, so it is located in Salzburg, not in Paris. Then sometimes that question comes up. So I have to go back to my PowerPoint. Oops. Otherwise, I'm in the wrong. How do I go forward now? There we go. So who are we? We are the Department of Geoinformatics of the University of Salzburg. We are about 80-ish people, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the project. And we have a long history of working in projects. So we have fairly little direct money and quite a lot of third-party money, project money. And that is also how we came into this humanitarian work. We formulated together with MSF research projects to develop and to demonstrate, very much similar to EUSPA, I would say, just about 10-ish years ago, how EU and or EO and GIS could be used for the humanitarian sector. And with that, well, this gave the users, at that time still in MSF, already MSF, the opportunity to see how that works. But of course, we do many more things. We do also basic research in remote sensing. We do applied research in risk hazards and climate, so landslides and so on, and different other topics like mobility, bicycle networks, and all these kinds of things. So we're a big department of with many applications, but today we talk mostly about the humanitarian action, which is here. So why? Well, to zoom out, this is the case. There is an increase of refugees and displacement. So that also puts a lot of strain on the actors who work in that. And that means we have to get faster, better, and more efficient. And Earth observation and GIS is one tiny piece in that. Of course, as mentioned by our previous speakers, Earth observation is not the solution to everything in the humanitarian action world, and we are just a provider of information towards them, and they do the really hard work, let's say. But it is one contribution that we give. Indeed, our partner is MSF, which is a medical organization, and that also shapes the products that we had been working on. So they are more for a user that has a medical agenda and not so much, let's say, for example, a food security agenda, which is also part of humanitarian aid. And there is another whole field of products that have been developed and that we have seen them with the USPA. So what you will see from our portfolio, so to say, is geared towards this user. And as you can see, it's a very big user and they have a lot of demand. And they also have a very strong GIS team. I put in the chat already the website of the MSF GIS Center, where you can get a really, really nice overview of applications of GIS and remote sensing in the humanitarian world. So you see example products, you see explanations for different aspects. And I really recommend having a look at that, because what we see is a wide range of application, let's say, maturity between some NGOs, which are just starting. They don't really know what they can do with that. Some say, well, they don't really need it because they are really very small. And then we have, on the other hand, we have very big organizations like the International Committee of the Red Cross, who are very good at GIS and remote sensing. We have Red Cross Netherlands, who have a research facility called 510 Global, which is really good, or the UN organizations, let's say in general, the World Food Program has a very comprehensive GIS department and EO department. And then also MSF were really strong in that. And then let's say in the middle ground, we have the organizations that require an external partner to produce maps. And these are spatial services. Of course, they are the best, but there are also others. Carto-NG is one of them, and Space for Good. Carto-NG is in France and Geneva, very closely connected to the humanitarian world, and Space for Good is in the Netherlands. So there are some companies who really do this, in particular for this sector, and who provide really good services. Our portfolio, and this is now the portfolio, this is now the portfolio of spatial services and us, say, together, just to get you an overview of what we do or what we work on is, well, mapping in camp mapping or refugee site mapping in urban settings, then damage mapping. So yeah, what is damage? How big is the damage? Flood mapping using optical or SAR data. We did sometimes support for groundwater exploration. Land cover as a general topic can be used for groundwater exploration in the sense that we need to protect wells. We have to make sure that the wells are not polluted. Or it can be change of land cover, which is helpful for infectious disease spreading, which are vector-borne diseases like malaria. And then, well, SAR analysis, which means all-weather capability, meaning it also in areas where it's frequently cloud cover, we can do things, rapid mapping, and yeah, vulnerability assessment, a wide portfolio of things that we provide. And yes, so this is our Christian Doppler lab. You see here my colleagues, and you see here the range of applications. You have now seen from Ahmed a bit the portfolio and the range of applications. And we step a step back and we see, okay, how can we improve that with this research, which on one hand is very applied, and on the other hand is also basic research. It's kind of in the middle. So some of the things we do are very close to a product, and others are more in the direction of basic research to better understand how the technology can be, or what trends in the technology can be used. And we have divided this into 3 areas. We call them image to info, but you could also call it remote sensing, which is a bit of 3D analysis and processing. Biggest thing is dwelling or building extraction, and then also SAR data and big EO data analysis. And then the second part, we call it consents, but one could also call it spatial analysis. It means putting things together using data that is available in a meaningful way. For the MSF context, that means health in urban areas, and then health and geography, let's say malaria, climate change, how does that impact the picture of areas that are potentially affected by infectious vector-borne diseases that have a component that is related to the climate. And finally, we have the area of cartography and ethics, which means how do we communicate that to the user? How do we make sure that the user understands what we mean with this map? And of course, the more complex a product becomes, the more challenging that is to make sure the user understands what we want to say and also understands the limitations of the product. So the biggest question still is how many people are in need, which is in the first place a question of how many people are there actually. And that is solved by mapping buildings. Yeah. And here you see that visualized. We saw this same location. This location basically popped out overnight. not really overnight. In the term of about 1 month, it grew to a size of 600,000 people, 100,000 buildings or so. And then mapping of these houses is the way to get an independent estimate of how many people might be there. And one might think, well, AI can do this automatically, but actually that's not really true. AI works well under ideal conditions, but under not so ideal conditions, it also has its peculiarities, and so there is still a lot of manual work also in it. So, and here we want to improve the work. So, when I say research in that direction, it means transferable building extraction. So we want to be able to do this building extraction faster and more reliable, so that the user can really depend on how fast we can deliver a product for a location, because the user has to decide, do they send this request to us? Do they use other means? Do they take the time to wait for a product, or are they not so sure whether it makes sense to wait, and they have to use another way to get to the information that they need? And well, there are different strategies that can be used, which depend on how much we know already about a location, meaning how many samples are available. So if an image is very similar to another image, or we have already mapped some buildings, then we can use another strategy, learning mapping strategy, then in an area where nothing is already there. So, and here, this is just a representation of the different directions in image understanding, computer vision, that we look into to see under which conditions should we go into what direction. And here you see, for example, one that is called weakly supervised semantic segmentation. Weakly supervised means we don't have labels for each image, for each building. We just have a label that says, in this image we have buildings, and this one we don't have buildings. And this is, of course, much faster to produce in terms of producing the training data, because the person just has to say yes, no for these little chips. And from that, the computer should then learn what the difference is between the image where that has something and the image that doesn't have something. So we want to get there in that sense faster and produce usable labels, which are usable in the sense of MSF users or humanitarian users, who are not as compared to, let's say, a cadastre user. And yeah, this is one research direction. We had 2 PhDs in this field who are now close to finishing, and we're very proud of their work. Another question, really very, very applied, is, can we map the mortality? Can we estimate the mortality of, let's say, mortality means how many people died in a certain time, which of course is an important information for a humanitarian actor to know if when there was a spread of, let's say, cholera or measles, how impactful that has been over the past. And we tried that with mapping of graves. You see 2 graveyards. And we tried to see how well that works, how good the numbers are, how that depends on the image quality that we might get, depending on either the sensor or the season of when we look at that, and of course also the circumstances, how the grades are being made. So this is one research, and very applied research, that we do in terms of image understanding. Another topic is, how can we make use of let's call it big EO data, yeah. So Copernicus data, for example, we have images every few days. How can we put that into value and make useful products? And here you see the area of Turkey and Syria, and we mapped here a land cover change. Actually, it's change of greenness. Also, how strong is the vegetation in these areas? And we see, of course, a strong decline in vegetation in Syria and a strong increase in vegetation in Turkey, which is due to a collapse of the artificial watering of water infrastructure in Syria. And yeah, and we use our comprehensive own methodology where we produce a semi-automated kind of land cover product from each image that we have, and then we stack them all on top of each other. And we might use that for these applications, but also for malaria. You saw the example already about SAR. Here we see examples how we try to make use of SAR remote sensing. SAR has gotten a very strong increase over the past, I would say, 2-3 years, with the launch of very high resolution commercial satellites. So it's now getting really much more mature. It's also much more accessible in terms of money. Some data is not as expensive as it used to be, and the reaction time of the satellites and the companies is very fast. So this is another way of how we make use of that, and also just demonstrating that, have the users see it, make them understand what this, interesting, colorful images, what they might mean, where the information is, and what is just, colorful. So it's also showing and educating by getting exposed to these products that we do there. And going into this EO and also geospatial data, there is really a big pool of data. On the left side, you see everything Earth observation, which we could describe by the 4 types of resolution. So mostly what you will know is spatial resolution, so how big is a pixel. And then what is derived directly from that. And then on the other hand, there are other products that are being provided by a range of authorities, providers, the Copernicus services, for example. And we, as a person in the middle, have to become what we call a data pharmacist. So we have to know what data to use under what circumstances to provide the right remedy. And having all these kinds of providers here gives us really an opportunity to use all these things, but also gives a challenge, because we have to know what are the qualities of the data, what are the constraints, and what are the use cases, and how do they fit together. Ideally, we would like to have, we do that in 2 ways. One way is we work on specific information products. In this case, it's about malaria risk mapping. So the risk of getting malaria or in certain locations, which is a combination of physical properties, but also the vulnerability of the population. And we bring that together. We do that in a close cooperation with the user for a specific application. And then let's call what we call user-centric co-design of information products. And then on the other hand, we want to know how we can make that more repeatable. So can we have a sort of description, like a catalog, or a semi-automated or even automated approach to test the data that is being produced by a provider that is coming up, to see whether we should use this one or that one, because when the request comes, they also always want to have the best product. And if there is something new coming up, we should know in advance whether the new, let's say, land cover product is usable for a given application. So there is another research of how to make that practical. And then finally, it's about mapping and communication. As you have seen this map before from Palong in Bangladesh. This is a product, I would say it's very complex. We might be able to make it a bit simpler, or we have to see how, what of those areas of the information pieces that are in there are actually helpful and what is more confusing. Do we need the colors of buildings, or is that not really necessary? So this is the third area of research. Thank you very much. I would like to finish with this view, and please invite you to our website here of the research project. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lorenz. And you raised a very, very good question that made it very clear how Earth observation helps to improve humanitarian action. I like very much this question, how many people are in need? That's true. The maps and the graphics you generate through your different modeling, we get a better idea of how to deploy the emergency service for how many people, and really can much better access the need. I really take this from. I invite everyone.
This still is the key question. We have, of course, population products which are also spatially disaggregated. So for each pixel, even that's very small pixels of 30 or even 90 meters or so, we have numbers of how many people live there. There's one from JRC as a European product. There is a very strong research group in England, in Southampton, which is called WorldPop, who provide this kind of information. They have an excellent, I would say, or state-of-the-art pipeline of producing this data globally. But of course, in a situation which is changing rapidly, people are on the move in the thousands, 10,000, 100,000, then those maps are obsolete. They are not helpful anymore. And then the basic question is, okay, how many people are we going to serve? In need here is a flexible term. When it comes to humanitarian service, it's a medical service. Yeah. So how many nurses do we need? How many children will be in that area? How many births can we expect? This is the scaling that the humanitarian organization at this level needs to know when they say, well, we want to employ a health post in a certain rural area somewhere.
Yeah. I see. Yeah, very, very good. And I see one question. Does Médecins Sans Frontières take open source contributions? One participant asks.
MDA, ask again. Thank you very much, MDA, for your question. I don't really know what you mean by open source contribution. They have a very strong cooperation with OpenStreetMap. So for OpenStreetMap, there is an organization called Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, HOT. They provide or build infrastructure to make it easy to map quickly an area, relatively quickly, let's say, so that volunteers can log in and say, well, I'm going to take this little piece and I'm going to map that, and then they hand it back, and it's really jobs that take like 15 minutes or so. So it's a really good management system to have this these open source contributions with OpenStreetMap are done. And then there's another organization called Missing Maps, which is let's say a network of NGOs where MSF is a part of, who promotes these the production of this data. So yes, they do. They use that frequently, and in every application they have to decide, do they go the open source route with public users, or do they go the internal route with service providers like spatial services, or themselves, let's say. So it depends then on the security, on how quick it has to be. For very big earthquakes, earthquake kind of damages, there is this very good international mechanism of the Charter and European Emergency Management Service and the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap mechanism, which is very fast and very very helpful for the humanitarian actors. But for use cases or for crises that are a bit under the radar, which are not so publicized, not so well known, that's where the niche is for, or the need for help by spatial services or by other service providers, or by their own mapping. That's doing it, to do their own mapping is nobody else is going to do it at the time that they need it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Usually we go via the chat, but MTA, maybe you could open the camera and introduce yourself, since you asked several questions and you had reacted while Lorenz was responding. Please. Does that respond to your question?
Okay, so my name is Michael Dako Eshing. I'm in Ghana with GIZ. I wanted to find out, because most of the time you might have a particular project, and I think it was answered that some of the projects might be a bit off the radar and they wouldn't publicize it. But the question was to the fact that there is a project going on, and then maybe there's a portal where they publish the project in, and they say these are the missing details in there, and then we say, if you are a contributor or you're a developer and you can to this particular aspect of it, maybe sign up, maybe you go through some meetings, you have, let's say, stipulated time to get it done. That was the kind of question I was asking, but effectively he answered that and he added more details to it. So
okay, perfect.
I'm good with it.
Thank you. Yeah, this is what I introduced was mostly for humanitarian actor, as MSF is. Whereas GIZ is a development actor, and of course they have a different agenda. So they have more, I would say, not so much of a time. The urgency is a little bit less, but the information need might be more detailed and more broad scale about development in an area, about how is the impact of, let's say, a campaign about agricultural changes, how is that being used, and that is what Food, for example, has this program called AIMS, Asset Impact Monitoring Service, which is very interesting because there they look at how a project that they have made has been changing over the years. So they just look at satellite images over time after the project is ending to see how much of the project is still there. Is the road still there? Is it still being used? Is the orchards that have been financed, are they growing or are they disappearing? So this is a humanitarian, more development agenda. which is also very interesting. And the KfW, Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau, the German development bank, also provided guidelines on how to use EO in their internal program supervision. So there again, the question is not so much where do I get the data and what do I do with the data, what do I do with the satellite images, but how to implement that in the program workflow. So can I replace a field visit with this kind of thing, with a satellite visit? Yeah? So this has to be clarified by the organization themselves, how they treat this kind of alternative oversight method. And I find that really interesting that they came to that level of remote monitoring and verification, as they call it. RMMV.
Thank you, Lorenz. We are now came to the end. Are there any more reactions from the audience, from the NGOs? No? To the speakers, Lorenz, Ahmad, Vasilis, do you like to say, take the floor for a last word or give a takeaway to the participants? Lorenz put in the chat the remote management, monitoring and verification from the KfW. To your
yes.
attention.
First of all, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. It was also a pleasure to meet you, my fellow speakers here, also the USPAR gentlemen. Very nice, very good work. Of course, I would jump on it to see where we could contribute in that framework, because of course, the bottleneck, we have to say, is always funding. Yeah, how do we produce a demonstrator for a certain user? Because although there are lots of demonstrators that have been done in the past, and probably with a little bit of research or guidance, it's quite easy to see this and to find a product that is similar to one's own needs, but to really get an experience of how fast I would get that, how what is then in the place in the product for my own area of interest, how would I then react to that when I get that? I think for that it's still necessary to make demonstrators with the user, and particularly for the specific users that are involved in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree, if I may, on this point, that there is a need for demonstrators, but there is also a need to have a proper follow-up of this demonstrator, because the objective has to be clear that we need the users, future customers of industries that will be involved, to have a good hook for continuing this interaction. I mean, we learn from the process. Even a demonstration doesn't work for whatever reason. I'll give an example. We see now the tool that was developed for Red Cross Ukraine, for example. We start receiving comments that, okay, that's nice, but I would like to see a bit more, you know. So in practical terms, meaning I would like more spatial resolution on the imagery, which has a cost, you know. So at demonstrator level, sometimes we might be successful, but then the practicality is like, okay, this thing can have a certain cost and is X, and then the practical issues emerge, particularly the ones connected with the resources and costs of services. There we have an issue, particularly on the humanitarian sector. We don't talk about the sector where, you know, you have big companies that could finance, and so this particularity we recognize for the very first moment. But okay, we're dealing with it to the level we can. There are, as you mentioned, NGOs like MSF, which is they have good capabilities, and and they have the funds to sustain this kind of services that you also presented
Right.
today, and some others, many smaller ones that have their own, little piece that maybe they will use that. They have the interest, but then you have to go with something very simple, open, developed for them to use. And then, of course, if they have the funds to sustain it, paying a little bit more for something additional, like a simple basic service, which can be free for them, developed, tailored, and then if they want to use it further, maybe in the future, some funding will be available, or if they have the funds to pay for something extra. So I see these two levels being like the free and open kind of model with some additional underpayment service, which will make things a little bit better, improve service level in certain variables. So these two are running in parallel. And yeah, you mentioned some of the players like Missing Maps and HOT. They do quite a good work on the humanitarian open source domain. There are, of course, always the crowdsourcing part. There are always questions on what is the quality, how you can rely on these data sets, pros and cons there to be analyzed and assessed by the customer and the user. All in all, thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for the opportunity, Roya.
Thank you. Thank you.
From our side also, we want to thank you, especially Roya. Thanks for your fast reaction and your organization for this webinar. And we hope this is our first webinar that we participate in, and we hope we participate in more and more for the coming ones.
Perfect, perfect. I also like to thank our members who joined. We had Catalonia with us, Occitanie, Veneto, Podkarpatsky, and Baden-Württemberg, and also invite them. If you are interested in any topics, please let us know. We will organize also sessions around it. I put again for you in the chat the link where you always find the next webinars we are organizing, the topics. There will soon be a new one on safety, security, and resilience. The one for education and training, Margarita put already the link in the chat. You are warmly welcome to connect. We have a very vibrant university and research community. We have universities in our member regions and a wide range of collaboration partners, and they discuss different education-related topics. With this, I thank you very much, and I wish you an excellent day.